Well, beauty means to me that you are able to look in the mirror and love who you are, inside, outside, flaws, everything. That you are so good with the person that you are in the world. And you just love and accept yourself.
Welcome to the Beauty Talk podcast, where we feature how the best medical practitioners help their patients to look better, younger, and healthier. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Beauty Talk. We feature the top practitioners in health and beauty, both inside and out. I have Elizabeth Everett, a licensed marriage and family therapist, behavioral health leader, and trauma specialist with more than 13 years of experience helping individuals, couples, families, and organizations heal, grow, and build healthier systems. She is the director of behavioral health at OneMed and the director of Hope Counseling and Associates, which has helped expand access to quality mental health care and supported thousands of clients and families through trauma, crisis, relationship challenges, and complex life transitions. Elizabeth is trained in multiple evidence-based and trauma-informed modalities, including EMDR, DBT, IFS, parts work, Gottman method, and somatic approaches. Known for blending clinical depth with honest, relatable insight, Elizabeth is passionate about making mental health conversations more human, accessible, and transformative. So, Elizabeth, welcome and glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so let's get started from the very beginning. What got you interested in, let's go with the broad field, the medical field? How did you get interested in the medical field?
So I actually started out fresh out of high school going into the medical field. I went straight into medical billing. I worked for Indiana University School of Optometry in Bloomington, Indiana, and I was part of their billing department. And from there, I went on to other hospital systems like University Hospitals in Cleveland, Ohio, which is a pretty big hospital system there. And I managed multi-specialty physician practices for them. So a large part of my early background was all in the medical field and insurance and billing.
Okay. And so what got you to then transition over to the mental health side of things?
So I was always working full time while I pursued my college education. I started off with an associate's degree in criminal justice. I really wanted to continue to pursue something in law enforcement. When I got my associate's degree, I then started working on my bachelor's degree in psychology. While I was working on my bachelor's degree, I actually was working as a home detention officer. And I would go out and I would meet with people. I would get them set up on all the electronic monitoring information and systems and get them acclimated to the program. It was very rewarding work. I loved working with people. But one day I encountered a young woman who was being set up on home detention. She was awaiting a criminal trial on a murder charge. And what she shared with me was that she had a very rough, traumatic upbringing. And she was in a relationship with a gentleman who had a 5-year-old son. And during the course of her watching this little boy and kind of being an additional parent figure to this little boy, she was disciplining him one day and completely lost it and ended up killing him in the discipline process. And it was at that moment in that conversation with her that I knew that I still wanted to be involved in mental health space, criminal justice space, but I wanted to help people before it got to this point. I wanted to help people heal. So I continued my bachelor's degree in psychology, finished that, and then I went straight into a master's program for marriage and family therapy.
Okay. And then that led you to become eventually director of behavioral health at OneMed and also director at Hope Counseling and Associates. What kind of led up to that point?
So I went into a field right out of graduate school that was working with families involved in the Department of Child Services. So families that were court ordered to have therapy provided to them due to various abuse or neglect situations. And through that work, I worked for a lot of companies that were doing this. I worked contract work for 2 different companies at one time. And within that, I saw things that could be done better. I saw needs that weren't being met. I saw policies and procedures that just could be implemented in a much better way that would have better outcomes for the families that we were serving. And I started Hope Counseling on my own as a way to have an agency that really met these needs and filled in these gaps that I was seeing. So I founded that and got state contracts through the state of Indiana. That has been ongoing since 2015, but I am not originally from the state of Indiana. I was born in Arkansas and lived all over the United States, and I eventually got tired of the winters. So I relocated to Florida, and I still am involved in the day to day of Hope and making sure that it is running smoothly. But I also needed something to occupy my time in Florida. So that's when I started my partnership with OneMed. And I started out just as a contract therapist there and working with their patients that they had, and then eventually moved up to a director role. OneMed is a great operation, and it is a whole care model. In one practice, we have primary care, psychiatrists, and therapists that all work together. So when a patient comes in, no matter what area of health is needed, we have practitioners and providers there to address all needs. So I really loved that model because it combined my mental health that I really love implementing, but it also combined my medical background that I initially started out with. So I get to join both worlds into one.
Got it. Okay. Now, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the treatments that you really specialize and focus on, complex trauma being one of them. Could you explain what is complex trauma? I mean, what makes it complex versus just regular trauma, or is it just kind of a terminology? Explain a little bit more for people who don't know what it is.
So it can be just a terminology for some people. One thing that I've really discovered throughout my years of working with people is there will be things that happen to people and they normalize it. And it's just a part of who they are. It's just what happened in childhood. It wasn't traumatic. That was just how I grew up.
Mm.
And so some people don't like the terminology complex trauma because it makes them feel like there's just so much that have happened or that's gone wrong. And I just don't see it that way. But for my work, complex trauma is trauma that kind of builds upon each event, just gets higher and higher and building and building. So we have all of these foundations and these bricks that have stacked up of traumatic events in someone's life. And it takes a lot to kind of break that down. It's not just one singular traumatic event that happened to someone. It's not just, a horrific car accident that they went through. It's multiple things that have happened throughout the course of their life.
Mm.
I have gone on in my training to get a credential. It's a CSACI is what it's called, but it's a credentialed sexually abusive youth clinician. And within that training, I've learned how to work with human sex trafficking victims, child sexual abuse victims, and then also juveniles who have problematic sexual behavior, and learning how to work within all of those areas and really help people address issues that have arose throughout their life pertaining to that.
Okay. Now, breaking down some of the trauma, some that you worked with is PTSD, which I think most people would imagine as you hear about with soldiers coming back from war and having PTSD. But in a non-war sense, how would PTSD be relevant or be applicable?
So I actually work a lot with patients with EMDR, and that actually EMDR was formed as a way to treat people that were coming from war. It was especially designed for veterans because that's what everyone targeted with PTSD.
Mhm.
And then later on in the years, we discovered that people who have gone through traumatic experiences, most recently the earthquakes that have happened in Venezuela, what we could talk about there is someone that was in a building that was collapsing around them. They may hear that sound of that building collapsing for years.
Mm.
The smell of everything, all the dust and everything that was around them, those oftentimes are carried for a very, very long time. And that becomes a very traumatic thing that they deal with, and they can be triggered in them at any point in time. So a lot of what I work with PTSD, I do work with military populations, but I work also with civilian populations that have had either one traumatic event that has happened that is causing issues or people that have had several traumatic events in their life that have caused issues.
Mm. Okay. And now, when it comes to attachment wounds, is attachment wounds all something that's related to PTSD, or is it something that's completely separate? And what is it? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, it can be. It really depends on the person. I actually was having this conversation earlier, and someone was sharing with me that as a child, their parent was never there for them. They were around, they were in the house, but their parent was kind of stuck in survival mode. They were constantly working and trying to keep everything going. So the parent was there, but was not attending to the child. The needs were never met. They were, often the child that no parent showed up at school events. And so there was an attachment wound that was kind of formed between parent and child because they weren't given the attention and love and care that it should have been. And the parent was an amazing parent,
Mm.
but they were just trying to survive. So
Mm.
they couldn't carry everything by themselves. So they did the best they could with what they had. And then now fast forward this person who is parenting their own children, they noticed that whenever one of their children has an emotional need, I need you to hold me. I'm crying, I'm upset. They want to be there for their child, but they're noticing that they also have this anger response. They feel
Mm.
very angry about that, about having that happen, that interaction. So we had a really great conversation about how that had started out as this attachment wound. And they have a wonderful opportunity with their own children to heal. But what's happening in the moment, they're healing this wound, but the wound is being reopened. They're
Mm.
being triggered and they're remembering that, my parent wasn't there to hold me when I was crying. And I'm angry about that. I'm mad about that. And so when they have this anger response to their own child, it's not really that they are angry at their child for needing them. They're more angry at the child that they were that didn't get them.
Mm. Okay.
So sometimes we can have an attachment wound that doesn't have anything to do with trauma.
Mm.
And sometimes we can have an attachment wound that is related or tied to trauma.
Interesting. Okay. And now on the next topic, family of origin. I've never heard of that before. Could you explain what that is?
So family of origin, we have families that we create. So I am married. I have 4 children. That is my family that I have created. My family of origin is the family that I come from.
Mm.
And my own family is very complex, which
Mm.
probably kind of helped me get into the field that I'm in. My biological parents divorced when I was 18 months old, and my dad got custody of all of us children. There was 4 of us at the time. My dad remarried when I was 2, so it was a very short period of my life where I didn't have 2 parents in the house, and so um, from that point, when I was 2, my stepmom came into my life, and she raised me. She's the only mother that I don't remember my biological mother because I was so young. So my family of origin is my biological parents, my step parents, and I have 7 siblings. So I have the original 4 from the original 4 children of us from my mom and my dad, and then my dad and my stepmother had one child together, and then my biological mother and her husband had 3 children together.
Mm.
So I have this fractured family that is still kind of blended in a way because I still talk to all of my siblings and involved in all of their lives.
Mhm. Okay.
But we
Now,
didn't grow up together.
yeah, okay, got it. So I'm sure that can also tie into maybe trauma and then, okay, coming from the family origin. Now,
Absolutely.
this other concept of surviving motherhood, which you talk about,
Yeah.
could you explain that?
Yeah, so it's something that I've actually started working on recently because throughout the 13 years that I've been practicing, I keep encountering parents who were raised by behaviorists. And behaviorist is, I see this behavior and I want to encourage the behavior because I view it as being good, or I see this behavior and I just want it to end. I just
Mm.
want it to stop. I immediately. And there's no soft parenting or gentle parenting, as the term is now. It's just this is good behavior, keep it going. This is bad behavior, stop it. And a lot of these parents were parented, the reaction to the parents is fear based. When my dad gave me a certain look, I already knew, and I just stopped. And so their reaction is very fear based. So now all of these parents who are parented this very specific way are now parenting their own children,
Mm.
and they're trying to do it differently, and they're really struggling. So I started this workbook, and I've written a book about surviving motherhood. And it really talks about how we have these wounds from childhood that are going to arise in our own parenting journey. I say, as an adult, we always break where we were broken as a child. So if I was a child who never had a voice or an opinion, I was to do what I was told to do when I was told to do it, no talking back, like just nothing. I didn't have a voice. I may encourage my own children to have a voice because I view the value in that. But then that also may trigger me when they have a voice, because when they have a voice, it's going to be at me. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to tell me, I don't understand why you need to do that. I don't want to do that. They're going to use that voice, and I'm going to have a reaction to it. So surviving motherhood is really about, how do I survive this relationship and this stage where I am trying to heal myself and also parent and raise emotionally healthy children, because
Okay.
I don't want to recreate wounds that were done to me.
And is the recreating those wounds from how they grew up, is that tying into that concept of generational cycles, or is that slightly different?
Absolutely. There is a great book that's out. It's some people it's very clinical, so it's kind of hard to read for some people. But it talks about it. It didn't start with you, and it talks about trauma and how these generational cycles of things occur within family lines. And so, surviving motherhood really does draw off of that. And I have seen in genograms where genogram is a drawing of like a family tree, but it's drawing in a very specific way, and it's focused on relationships, and it's focused on who had mental health issues, who had substance use issues, who had relationship issues. So we map that out within a family, and you can see how the generational cycles get passed down with each branch of the family
Mhm.
until you have the one person that says, I want to break this cycle. How do I do that? What exactly am I breaking? What needs to be fixed here?
Wow. Okay. Now, Elizabeth, you have this perspective that healing is not about becoming someone brand new. It's really just accepting who you are and having that show. Could you talk a little bit more about, I guess, what led you to have that perspective?
Absolutely. So I, within my own self and my own journey, have really discovered that there are things about my personality that are there because of trauma that existed within my own childhood. I tend to over explain myself because I want to make sure that the person that I'm talking to understands me. Because as a child, if I wasn't understood, that was not a safe situation to be in. There was some harm that could be caused if I wasn't understood. So that has now become part of my personality. That's not going to change about me. I'm always going to have this need to want to be understood. And I'm always going to have this desire to try to over explain to make sure that someone is getting what I'm saying. So it's not about changing that. It's about understanding where that comes from. And then I get to be more in charge of when that shows up for me, or how much I pay attention to it, and learning that sometimes it's okay to stop. I can walk away. I don't have to over explain. Maybe I'm even trying to over explain myself to someone who is not really concerned about understanding what I'm saying. They have no desire in understanding, where I'm coming from. And I don't have to waste time or energy in situations like that. It's okay for me to walk away from those things.
Okay. Now, I'm sure that you've heard a lot of myths or misconceptions from your clients and your patients, maybe about the treatment or maybe about what their trauma is, or just anything along those lines. What would you say some of the most common misconceptions or myths that you hear?
I think One of the things that I hear most commonly does go back to trauma. And when I hear stories, people share with me about that they were left alone a lot. And, they, at a young age, 7, 8, 9, 10, they were, letting themselves in their home. There was no parent there. They were cooking their own dinner. They were watching their younger siblings, making sure they got to bed. They were doing all these things that is very parentified, that was not traumatic in any way. Or a person talking about, we really struggled. We didn't have electricity some of the time. Half the time we didn't have running water. Food was kind of scarce, but that was okay. My family was great. That wasn't traumatic. People have this misconception that this to say that they have experienced trauma, that it needs to be this big event that is horrific, and it doesn't have to be. We all experience trauma on different levels. I have what I call, and this is kind of tied back to EMDR too, there's big T trauma and there's little t trauma. So little t trauma may be you came home Monday through Friday to an empty house and there's no parent there to greet you and you just felt very alone. And big T trauma may be, a sexual assault that you survived. So people have this misconception that trauma has to be big in order for it to qualify as trauma.
So I guess it's more, I could just say it's more about perception, the perception of the individual that went through it and how it affected them is going to qualify it as traumatic or not traumatic for them.
Right. And sometimes within the treatment plan, there can be a lot of benefit of taking this little t trauma event and processing through it and understanding how it did impact you and how it shows up for you now. But sometimes because people, their perception of it is that it was not traumatic to me, therefore it does not impact me. Therefore, I do not need to spend any time talking to you.
Got it. Okay. Now, Elizabeth, let's say that somebody has gone through some trauma in the past. They want to try and work through it. So they're looking for a counselor, a therapist, a mental health professional. What advice would you give to this person so when they are doing their search, they can find that expert who knows what they're doing, has experience, who they trust, and who can help them work through their issues?
Absolutely. So I would definitely look at the credentials of the person that they are working with. You definitely want to find someone that is trauma trained and trauma informed. There are some therapy modalities that could be more harmful than helpful when we're dealing with trauma. Cognitive behavioral therapy or narrative therapy, where you're just retelling the information over and over and over, that can sometimes cause more harm. So you want someone that is very trained in specific therapy modalities, whether that's EMDR, brain spotting, ACT. You also need to look at the degree of the person. So, someone that is a marriage and family therapist, they're going to have more education and training in relationships of families and how that may impact us, versus someone that is a social worker, that they just may not have as much training in family systems. So if your trauma is revolving a lot around your family of origin or relationships, then you may want to work with someone that has more training in that area.
Got it. Now, when it comes to the future, where do you think the future of mental health is going?
Very interesting question. So with AI, and I have
Mhm.
this conversation a lot in session with my patients, a lot of them are using ChatGPT in between sessions to be
Mhm.
like the sounding board of this is what I'm thinking. And some of them will even like put conversations into ChatGPT and be like, how do I best respond? And I want to sound, you know, professional and not as emotional in my response. And so I see a lot of patients and clients that are using AI a lot in between sessions. And I believe that that's going to change the course of what mental health treatment and therapy looks like in the future. I think insurance companies will start tapping into that and offering platforms that are AI based that their subscribers can use before going out and seeking provider like myself that would meet with you, in face to face or through telehealth.
Got it. Okay. Well, Elizabeth, I have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I do want to point people to your website at onemed.clinic. Now, last question for you. What does beauty mean to you?
Well, beauty means to me that you are able to look in the mirror and love who you are, inside, outside, flaws, everything. That you are so good with the person that you are in the world. And you just love and accept yourself.
Okay. Wow. There you have it. Elizabeth sharing her expertise. So, Elizabeth, where can people contact you in your practice?
So, through the website at onemed.clinic, you could also use the HOPE website, which is hopeca.org. And then the telephone number for our office is 317-757-2523.
Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, this was great. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and thanks for sharing your message.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Beauty Talk podcast. Any questions, please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.